what we decided to do was to say, okay, what does a customer need to feel confident that this isn't going to be some gigantic engineering project that takes 18 months and involves all sorts of confusing decisions? And so we came to a couple of things. One, there's a bunch of decisions within PWA Kit that just have to be made. And we've had 5 years of experience of making those decisions. We've made a bunch of mistakes and know what doesn't work. Let's make those decisions and let's make that part of what we bring to every project. So that's sort of part one. Take the expertise, take the knowledge, and start from there. Don't offer choices, start from the expertise. The second thing was, well, what's usable within PWA Kit? And it was clear at that point that Page Designer, while it could be hacked around to make work, and it can, wasn't going to be very good, frankly. It wasn't really designed. Why would you invest in all of this front-end goodness and then hack Page Designer to work in it? So we looked around at the opportunities for headless CMS in the space, and it was clear to us that you guys at Amplience had both a good installed base, good engineering culture, and a good attitude to the customers that you worked with. And we sort of were kind of simpatico. So we thought, right, we want to build Amplience in as a part of this. We want to be able to show customers what they could get. And that was a part of what the Accelerator is too. It's an accelerator, but it's also our demo. So we're a Salesforce customer. We bought a realm, a full production realm, and scraped a bunch of products and put this accelerator together. But really what that accelerator encapsulates is technical decisions that we've made that we use as the starting point for every project that we do. Okay, so great, fab, but why? Well, as an expertise agency, all you have is experience of situations that have arisen before. And our feeling was, you don't want engineer over here to be attacking a problem that engineer over here did on a project 2 months ago, but which neither overlapped on. So the purpose of an accelerator for us is to enable us to do projects more quickly. It's not a product, you don't license it. It's just to enable us to capture our expertise and implement it effectively for every customer as we roll out new projects. The second part of it is a theory about customers. And our view is that if we're the experts, it's our job to come in and drive the bus on a project for the parts of the bus where it makes sense for the technologists to be driving the bus. So the accelerator allows us very quickly to let customers see their site working in PWA Kit. We have a phase of a project called Sprint Zero. It lasts about 2 weeks. And in that time, we throw the accelerator at their APIs and we see what works out of the box. What we find is in about 2 weeks, the site will work. I mean, you can check out on it. Now, everybody that's built one of these knows that doesn't mean anything, but it's there. It looks like their site. You can check out on it, and at that point, it's clear that the project is that we've developed enough trust from a client for them to let us drive the bus. The second part of it is that if we're going to drive the bus, let's drive the bus fast. Let's put if we know what we're doing driving this bus, so let's put our foot down. So we wanted to find a way to maximize that stage of a project where our expertise was sufficient to give us the right to drive the bus quickly. So we come up with this 8-week time-boxed period of time where the brief to the team is do as much of this project as humanly possible within 8 weeks. And typically we get about 70% plus of our whole project done in that 8 weeks. The value of that is it's time-boxed, it's fixed price, there's minimal risk for the client, and they've already found out in Sprint Zero whether we think there's likely to be any real problems. So de-risk the project for the client, apply the expertise intensively, and get to a point where the project is, you can see the horizon, you can see the finishing line. Because that's the other insight is you can drive the bus for a certain period of time on a project, but you shouldn't be driving the bus over the finishing line, because and the bus analogy stops working fairly soon, so I'll abandon it momentarily. But it's clear that an internal team needs to own a project. And so there's a point as a third phase of a project that we call build to launch, where what we're essentially doing is presenting the customer with, here's what's left, and here's our scope, and here's how we would do it. Here are the areas that remain for you to complete, and here's how long it would take us to do it. However, if you want, you can pick this project up yourself as an internal team and finish it from here with a bit of consulting help from us. You can hand it over to a capable partner. I mean, we're working now on Sweaty Betty with Trizens, and the intention really is to work with them as the trusted partner of the client to develop the skills necessary to support the site over the long term. Or you can have us do it, and we drive it over the line, and we probably get there a little bit faster than otherwise. But that's the phase when projects go wrong, when you driving the bus becomes a problem. And what we've recognized is you have to put them in the driving seat more to take it over the line, because they're the ones who are going to have to look after this site long term. Yeah, absolutely. I think that's very true, and ultimately you've got to maintain and support that front end, haven't you, going forward? So I think you've outlined the Scopotype approach and the 3 phases very nicely. When you deal with customers using that approach, where do you see them struggling the most? What typically are the things that maybe they should think about differently, or think harder about coming into that sort of project? Any kind of change project like this does a number of things. It shines an uncomfortable light on whatever workarounds have been in place for the last 2 or 3 years. And I think one of my pieces of advice is be honest about them, own them, and be direct in accepting the need to deal with them. So that there's things that are being done that you should think about. So own them. That there's usually a problem as well around the management of the process of going from a monolithic, template-driven architecture, where there are sort of people dotted around the place who've got sort of basic HTML skills and can sort of manipulate things, and to a world where actually what you really need are specialists in the CMS, specialists in search, competent React developers. I think there's a transition from a more generalist team to a more specialist team that I think it's easier to get a grip of early in the process than later. Like, we get on a lot of projects, customers saying, well, we've got someone who's going to be the React developer on the project, and there's a tremendous amount of goodwill and desire, but it takes a lot. You can take a competent React developer and show them how to support a PWA kit site. It's hard to take someone who's interested in React all the way to that goal during a project, but I think that's something we're going to take more and more responsibility for and have to accept. So I think thinking through skills gaps, confronting the reality of technical debt or workarounds that aren't necessary anymore, I think that's definitely part of it. I think patience might be one of them. I think that there's a temptation in a big change process like this to think, well, I've got PWA kit now, and I've got a new Amplience set up, and everything's hunky-dory. I should be immediately seeing huge increases all over the place. And my expectations around conversion improvements, micro conversion improvements, I would personally temper them in the initial stages, because I think it's important to have patience and actually observe the reality of what your new site is and does before you start wanting to change it. It's tempting for customers to come in and say, well, hey, we've got 3 new vendors that we've immediately acquired straight after doing this. And I think that the patience is a patience with what you've bought, and a willingness to look at how it works in reality before you start deciding how you're going to make your next move would be something I'd probably counsel to.
Yeah, I think that will make very good sense. So do customers generally take this opportunity to do a redesign, or is it a bit lift and shift? What are you seeing when you talk to customers about the project?
It's super difficult to convince customers that while they're ripping out all their front end and changing the architecture, they shouldn't touch the function, the user interaction design that they've got. And I can 100% understand why there is a temptation to do that. We generally prefer to have customers, if they must, tweak the things that they've wished they could tweak for the last 12 months. It's very hard to resist that, and there's no logical argument against it. If they haven't been able to put products on this page and suddenly we can enable that in PWA Kit with Amplience, then you should do it. Well, that's not a big deal. Where there's a potential challenge is when customers literally do say, oh, while we're doing this, we've decided to throw everything out, because now you've got two moving parts. Now, it's an awkward situation for us, because our view is that user interaction design for e-commerce is a sort of a solved problem. That if when a customer says they want to do a redesign, what they mean is, well, we want to change the color here and we'd like that button to be over here, and we want, that's fine. We don't really regard that as a redesign. That's just the user interface change. That's fine if that's what they want to do. What the redesigns that are more difficult are ones where they're saying, no, we've decided to rethink the whole way that a user interacts with the site. And our recommendation would be that that process is done in advance. We ride shotgun with you on that to warn off dangerously difficult, non-performant ways of doing things, but that you should have at it with someone just keeping an eye on a design firm that goes bonkers. But in truth, I don't see many strong arguments for real redesigns. People working within companies get far more bored with their site design than users do. Again, this is somewhat English-centric, but if you look at things like, I always look at Private Eye as a good example of this. Like, Private Eye's design probably hasn't changed as a magazine for 60 years, basically. It certainly hasn't in the time that I was reading it. And what you get from it is a familiarity with what's there. In some senses, for me, if your design is something that customers are familiar with, I wouldn't throw that out immediately as you're ripping out the architecture of the front end. Because I think the new architecture you've built gives you much more flexibility to tweak and change things without massive risk than you had before. So be patient on design. And if you can't be patient, then have a technologist work with the design team so that it doesn't go mad.
Yeah, one of the things that I see amongst some of our customers is they've had a pretty tight team that's been quite cross-functional. They've been a little bit Swiss Army knife around stuff. So, the content people, are part art director, part copywriter, and part template editor stroke HTML wizard. And quite often that's a helpful combination because they can get things done quite quickly and they can get end-to-end through a task. Obviously, in the new world, there's more separation of concerns and you need a little bit more technical expertise to do the front end change, because that is a proper development task now. It's not something you can hack together. And art direction and copy should really drop into the tool set and the workflow. That requires a bit of business change, and it requires a little bit of thought to ensure that it's working correctly. And that sort of feeds for me into the CMS discussion, because I think one of the things, John, that you and team have done really well in the Accelerator is start to bring control over the front end experience into the realm of just configuration. It's just something you set up and manage without devs.
I'd agree with that. I think that is an obvious, self-serving sentence alert, but that's the value of having expert partners help you in architecting how you approach this. Is there's a bunch of possibilities in this process, but if you don't really know how it fits together and you've never done it before, it's quite difficult to exploit those possibilities. And I think, we do see that in technology implementations where the technology is implemented, there's a sort of basic functionality at start, but the internal team can't quite make it do as much as they wanted it to do, and it sort of sits there and doesn't deliver on what was expected, not because it can't, but because everybody's got other stuff to do, and this will just about do, and we can kind of work our way around it. The opportunity in PWA Kit is to take a very joined up approach to how all of these constituencies now work together. So I agree. I think that's one of the fundamental opportunities. There are tools now that allow design and development to very effectively communicate to each other what they're trying to do in ways that make it easier. There are effective content modeling and thinking through and architecting a CMS approach that takes into account the needs of the business today and is flexible enough to expand to what they're going to want in the future, allows you to pretty much play as many shots as you want going forward. But you're not going to get that quality of implementation unless you're working with people who really do know what they're doing in implementing headless technology. And there are precious few companies who do that. And actually, this may be one of the things that companies like yours and mine have to do better at, is I don't think we necessarily train customers well enough. We don't flush out what they really want from us well enough at the point when we've got their maximum engagement. And there's a temptation to say, well, look, you've bought this tool, we've done some training, we've implemented what you said you wanted, thanks very much, great working with you. And for the knowledge not really to have been effectively transferred to allow them to feel that they can actually manipulate this tool. And that's why I think internal specialists are going to become more important. You don't want the sort of generalist who managed the CMS before to necessarily be in charge of what's happening now, because this is a tool with massive potential to achieve all sorts of things that's been effectively architected to do that. And if the people running it don't really understand its full potential and don't feel confident implementing it, then you're not going to get as much out of it as you want. So that whole change management side of PWA Kit, I think, is one that we're increasingly going to have to get our heads around. And I think a lot of it is our responsibility. We're building this stuff. We need to hand over to people feeling that they really understand it. And similarly, I think you're providing this tool. It's important that you work with people like us to make sure that customers know not just what it does today, but how to develop it going forward.